Welcome, welcome, welcome. I see lots of people flooding in. I see us announcing ourselves in the chat. We are so happy to have everyone here on the call today joining us for our Black History Month virtual event. As we're trickling in, we can leave the slide up just a second, Jennifer, so that everyone can take a look at what we have planned for today's agenda. So we are going to take a deep dive into the past in order to change the future. And we have two very exciting guest speakers for you today. And maybe just about 1 minute, we'll go ahead and take a look at our next slide. Thank you so much, Jennifer. So as everyone's coming in, I would love for you to just take a brief moment and look at this question that we have up for you. We want to know, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? And this is something that you can put in the chat as we're sharing our introductions and welcomes. Just go ahead, maybe take 30 or so seconds to think about how you would answer that question when you were a kid. And I'm seeing some cool answers come through already. So thank you so much to those of you who are participating. I'm seeing a very wide range of responses. Plastic surgeon, Michael Jordan and Space Jam, a teacher, a wedding planner, singer came up a few times. Awesome. So this is something that I kind of just want us to hold and keep top of mind. We're definitely going to return to it later to kind of have a more impactful discussion. So I want everyone to kind of know that answer when we return to our follow-up question. And if you're just joining the call and you see the question on the screen, just please put your response in the chat. And then Jennifer, whenever you're ready, we can go ahead and kick it to the next slide. Thanks so much. All right, so keep those answers coming because I see lots of people on the call. And while we're doing that, I'm just going to kind of give a brief rundown of what you can look forward to. And thank you again for attending today's event. So for today's event, we're going to be hearing from some dynamic speakers. If you join right at the top of the call, you may have seen their pictures and their titles on our very first slide. But these individuals are currently doing exciting things in STEAM industries. We're hoping that you'll hear about some jobs that perhaps you've not heard about before. And also, we're going to be learning from them how the work that they do encompasses Black history, as well as how their identity informs the way they ideate in STEAM and actually achieve activism through their work. You can go ahead, Jennifer, to the next slide. Thank you. So also, while you're here, if this is your first time engaging with us as an organization, we wanted to make sure we were also taking this time and space to kind of introduce who we are to our audience. So Career Catalyst, in addition to being the platform that you see described on this slide, is a mission-driven organization working to empower more BIPOC youth to pursue STEAM careers. We do this by connecting them to culturally relevant, immersive, and socially responsible content that educates them about exciting STEAM professionals to those individuals whom you're going to meet today. We aim to inform, activate, and inspire by delivering compelling stories. Our stories always feature real-life figures demonstrating their work, sharing their personal narratives of unique lived experiences, as well as how their identity informs the way they ideate activism through their work. We are empowering underrepresented youth to pursue pathways to participate in the future of work. And Jennifer, with that being said, you can go ahead to the next slide so I can introduce, you can go past this one. I want to introduce to everyone the individual behind the mission. Thank you, right here, awesome. So Dr. Hassan is going to be our host for today. He's going to be leading our panel discussion with the two people we have whose careers you're going to learn more about. And I just wanted to introduce you to him before we get into our discussion. So he's a career-long educator with a very long history of dedication to our cause and our mission. He has always worked to make sure that the communities furthest from opportunity are able to gain access to the opportunities that guarantee them viable futures. He's used his experience across various fields, so basically hone his expertise as a college and career readiness and workforce development expert, and that's what he's bringing here to Career Catalyst.
Thanks a lot, Brianna. And before we get started, I'm really excited to introduce you all to today's guest. But I want to call back to that question that Brianna initially posed at the start of our the session. We asked you all to go into your 15-year-old selves, 15-year-old bodies, your minds, and thinking about what did you want to be as an adult, right? Now, thinking back to that same profession, did you become that? Are you in that role right now? I know we don't have the master DJ, we don't have MJ from Space Jam up in here. But the question is, why not? So thinking about maybe the people or the resources or the opportunities, what was it that allowed you to either achieve that vision for yourself, or perhaps even maybe have impeded you? Take about 30 seconds and just sit with that. And I invite you all to put your responses into the chat. And while you all do that, we can fast forward to the slide of our first guest, who I'm really excited to introduce you all to. So she's also been featured in one of our Career Catalyst episodes. She's a third-year graduate student in the program for Maritime Studies at East Carolina University and is the recipient of the 2022 Women Divers Hall of Fame Cecilia Connolly Memorial Graduate Scholarships in Underwater Archaeology. She's also a grad student associate of the Advisory Council on Underwater Archaeology, Stephanie Sterling. Next, he has been featured in Forbes, CNN, Gravity, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications, and was recently named the inaugural Forbes to Culture 50 Champions list that highlights 50 Black and Brown people in the U.S. who are working to uplift their communities. He's a born and raised Tulsan entrepreneur who's also the founder of Black Tech Street, which is an initiative to rebirth Black Wall Street as a Black tech capital, Tyrance Billingsley II. He's also featured in one of our Career Catalyst episodes. So clap it up for them in the chat. And without further ado, we'll shift it over to hearing from Stephanie and Tyrance. All right, so both of y'all, we've hung out, talked at length about tons of things. But 30-second pitch for folks who haven't seen your content, aren't familiar with you all. Can you briefly tell us what you do and what you're trying to accomplish through your work?
Okay.
And Stephanie, we'll start with you.
Sure. I'm Stephanie. Thank you for the introduction. I currently, while in grad school, my thesis is focusing on the African-American influence on the Lower Cape Fear, specifically the rice plantation waterways and the Gullah Geechee culture that has descendant communities in the project area that I'm working. So I'm trying to bring that history to the forefront, as well as discuss how particular plantation styles, so the rice plantation waterways, how they afforded some tiny semblance of freedom and autonomy for the enslaved person, in that they were experts of those waterways. They knew how to man those vessels and could survive easily, not easily, but could survive in a more autonomous way. And then I'm also a PADI dive master, and I'm AAUS scientific diving certified. And before grad school, I worked extensively with the National Park Service as an archaeologist, as well as in private sector. And then I will continue from last summer till this summer. I'm going to be returning up to Glacier Bay National Park as one of their seasonal archaeologists as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tyrance Billingsley II, the founder, executive director of Black Tech Street. So as Hassan kind of talked about, the core of our work is to, well, if you have some historical context, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you had what was once the most affluent community of African Americans in the history of the country up until that time, dubbed by Booker T. Washington as Black Wall Street. It was destroyed in the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. and it was rebuilt and then destroyed again via urban renewal / urban removal. So the core of our work is to rebirth this incredible community as a Black tech capital with a key focus on the verticals of cybersecurity and business intelligence as a precursor to artificial intelligence. But we also want to use this narrative and the ecosystem building template to kind of catalyze this movement of Black people using tech as a means to, build wealth for themselves, to avert the Black wealth crisis of 2053, but also just as a means to express their creativity that we have always had in the world.
Appreciate that. And you all have both said a lot. And so for the audience, I invite you to, as questions, comments come up for you, please jot them into the chat. This is an interactive experience. In the meantime, Tyrance, Stephanie, let's get into it. So I know you all both stay on the move, like Tyrance right now. I know you have a hard stop at 1:45. Right now, this brother, you are in DC, about to go to the White House, about to give a whole talk, right? So you'll speak on that in a moment, but I wanted to hear from you all. Since we filmed, what have you all been up to since you filmed together?
So since we filmed, a lot has happened. I did start working up at Glacier Bay National Park. That park is full of, it's primarily water-based, but they don't have a maritime archaeology program. And the supervisor that I have is incredibly supportive of trying to undertake projects that focus more on that Indigenous history and paleo landscapes, and looking more into submerged maritime cultural resources, which has been sort of on the outskirts or the periphery of their project planning. And often that has to do with the day-to-day kind of roles that archaeologists play in the park, and a lot of compliance efforts. But then along with that, after finishing up the season, I returned down to Greenville and needed to do some more survey in the area. And so my project area is focused down in Brunswick, and kind of the area that splits Brunswick County and New Hanover County, which is by Wilmington and Eagles Island. And so there's where the Cape Fear River splits is called the Brunswick River. And that area is kind of where I focused, mainly because when I decided to do rice cultivation history from an African-American perspective, my first step was to reach out to the community. And there was a Gullah Geechee Commission meeting that I sort of asked if I could just sit in on. And from that point on, it just kind of flourished, where I was meeting with community members like George Beatty, who didn't know that he had grown up on a plantation. And so everywhere he took me, he was telling me the history, because I thought we were just having a Panera lunch date, but it turns out it was a full 3-hour tour. I met his family and it was great. So he makes a mean blackberry wine, but
speaking my language,
right? And so it was very community based at that point, and I really just wanted to be an amplifier and not talk over what some of the descendant communities were trying to get out of the history of that area. I'm not from North Carolina. I'm not Gullah Geechee, but, or at least by culture. I do know that my ancestors did come through North Carolina, but it's not a space that I can really claim to know more about than the people who grew up and lived here. And so it's been a really great process. But from that point, the area that I was originally surveying kind of fell a little bit south of where that community in Navassa was. And so when I returned, I wanted to resurvey, and by survey, I mean using technology such as side scan sonar, which is basically a fish finder. If you're familiar with those, it's you have a little bit more to, it's higher resolutions with the equipment that we're using. And there's a lot more post-processing manipulation that we can use after collecting the data. So basically we have a towfish, it's strung behind the boat. And then what it does is sound waves will ping off of the bottom and will return an image to you. And so that's how we can sort of try to identify where any material culture is left over, vessels, rice trunks, any kind of material culture related to the rice cultivation. I don't want to speak too much more because I know we're on a time crunch, but so basically I've done some resurvey. I've spent a lot of time in the archives, and I will say quickly, one of the most profound moments I've had is actually finding a collection of documents that pertain specifically to the area that I'm working in. And it has the list of enslaved people's names in the back, their offspring,
wow.
some areas of where they may be buried. Like, and that I had a moment where I got goosebumps. I had to stop. Like, I'm sure I looked like a crazy person in the archives, like, because I was having a moment. And because when I can look at these names, it becomes more tangible that this work is important. And then as well as asking George, who I mentioned earlier, for his family lineage, I mean, they're the same last names that I'm trying to work
Right,
from
they
my
overlap.
end. We have his end, and how can we kind of bridge that gap?
Nah, I get goosebumps just hearing that. How about you, Tyrance? What have you been up to so recently?
Yeah, so since we talked, it was actually November of that year, we ended up hosting, I told you we have been brokering a partnership with Microsoft that isn't announced yet, but an initiative, a holistic initiative called the Digital Transformation of Black Wall Street to Black Tech Street, where Microsoft will be partnering with our community to enhance some of the key areas necessary to lay the groundwork for cybersecurity and business intelligence as a precursor to AI to really thrive. So in November, we hosted two people from Microsoft, Desmond Forbes at the partner level and Zane Elrod, a director of business development, each in cybersecurity. We convened a meeting where we had the mayor, some city councilors, state representatives, local ecosystem and philanthropic entities, and they essentially spoke to the community to kind of give them a precursor of what's about to happen. This initiative is going to touch everything from broadband access to creating a holistic pipeline through the University of Tulsa, which is one of the top cybersecurity institutions in the country, that will allow Black students to actually be able to go through these programs and actually have a fast track, some to careers at Microsoft and some elsewhere. A part of the work that we've been doing is on a macro level, we're really trying to figure out how do we transform our entire community through tech, and how do we really provide a key blueprint. So one of the things we did is we commissioned a study in Tulsa to figure out how many Black Tulsans would need to be in tech jobs by the year 2030 to bring the Black tech population up to the national average. We're at 6% in Tulsa right now. We need to be at 14%. So we're looking at about 865 jobs over the next 7 years that we need to create. Again, it's not super public yet, but we're kind of coalescing around that number. But in the same breath, I will share, as we're talking about triumphs, I'll also share something that was a bit of a shock for me. As we talk about building wealth, we also did another study to figure out what is needed to bridge the income gap between North and South Tulsa. As you know, North Tulsa is predominantly Black population. Right. South Tulsa is more affluent white population. And it's kind of like a punch in the face. We learned that 24,000 North Tulsans would need jobs that pay $74K a year just to bridge the income disparity between North and South Tulsa. And it really speaks to the inequity that's been ingrained systemically over a while. So in the spirit of focusing on what can immediately be addressed, we're going to focus on the A65 number, and that's kind of what a lot of these efforts have been coalescing around. But we're trying to figure out how to work that broader number into the platform of some of the upcoming mayoral candidates, so Microsoft can kind of help support and build that Black tech platform.
Okay, and so Stephanie and Tyrance, across both of what you all have just shared, is very contextualized to historical context of, I mean, not just Tulsa, but also like the U.S., the systemic systems and endemic problems that have really plagued low income and Black communities, and it's really powerful to hear, Tyrance, how you're helping to disrupt and break that down, and that you found allyship around that. Stephanie, a lot of your work, like I'm still to find like that ledger of names, and to know that their descendants are probably a mile, 2 miles down the road. I'm wondering, I mean, we can probably talk about this later. Are you going to take any action with that, with those names? Like, are you going to convene families and give them, like that? It's powerful stuff. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on what you might do with that information?
So you know how last year you guys were here over the Rice Festival, well, that's happening this weekend. And tomorrow I'm actually going to the North Carolina Gullah Geechee committee meeting. That's public as well, but it's sort of tied in and planned to be at the same time as the Rice Festival. And they are having, so George is the chair of that event, and he also had planned, there's a African ancestry reveal event that's going to be happening. And I was not able to get my ducks in a row. It's been a very hectic semester, but we were initially trying to have sort of a side event where I could interview those people who are from Navassa and from Brunswick County, who kind of got their results, and ask them questions about ask their questions about their history, and then to try and start piecing this puzzle together if any of these names overlap, kind of like with George Beatty's. So I won't be able to do that component. It was just not enough time to plan it. But I think eventually I do plan to have, whether it's maybe a virtual Google Docs if I'm not in North Carolina, or some other kind of event to do that. Oral history is a really underappreciated and underutilized historical tool, especially in archaeology. But how are we, I mean, it's sort of audacious of us to think that we can offer more insight into someone's history or someone's family than the people whose family it is. So I like to sort of combine the methods, the scientific data, the historical archival data with oral histories to build the biggest picture. So yes, there is sort of a plan, kind of long-term in that, and it's sort of ingrained into tracking these lineages.
Researcher through and through. I love the approach. And I was kind of keep tabs on how that engagement goes. That's really powerful. And I will be remiss if I didn't name, okay, this is the last day of Black History Month. And I will say that Black History Month doesn't mean that we stop talking about Black history. Like tomorrow doesn't mean that we start talking about something else. It just means that this is the month where we could be blackity black. And tomorrow we can still be blackity black, but as we're having the national conversation, right? So I know sometimes people will say, well, we're gonna get 28 days. It's like, no, we don't. We get as much time as you need. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. With that being said, with this being Black History Month, Tyrance and Stephanie, how does the historical context of Black History Month, how does it inform your work? And Tyrance, will start with you.
Yeah, so well, for one, I was born in Black History Month, February 8th. So I mean, I've always tried to learn to personally inform, how I move.
Happy belated.
I appreciate it. But specifically as it relates to the work that we do, I mean, everything we do is built on the foundation of what my ancestors and the ancestors in our community have built. So when we talk about Black history, there are a lot of quotes that say, our history, isn't even our past. It's actually still the present, especially when you're dealing with a lot of issues that are still persisting from what happened in history. So as we move and as we work through BTS and with some of our partners to do the work of, trying to rebirth this community, helping entrepreneurs, raising awareness, it's very key that we remember this work is being done to do justice to our ancestors to the extent that we can do it. I mean, I don't have to tell you, Tulsa has not had reparations yet, so I can't say I've fully done justice. We're doing justice, but we're doing what we can. So I let that frame the work that I do, and I also let it empower me, because even though there are a ton of horrible obstacles that we might face today, our ancestors faced worse obstacles and they overcame them and became what they became. They became the giants that we're trying to look to emulate and to try to help elevate their story and their progeny, to a better place. So I think that Black history is the entire framework within which the present of working towards Black interests takes place.
Can I also, it's interesting that you and I are kind of paired up in this discussion, Tyrance, because one of the kind of interesting things, another thing that I found in that collection were a series of letters between the widow of the former plantation owner and her tenants on her land. She sold land to the first AME church in that area, the Mount Calvary AME church, and then also to a Black freeman named Daniel McNair. And in those letters, it talks about exactly what you're talking about, what you're trying to do right now. But the difference is, how do we get from under the sort of overarching white landlord kind of mentality? Because the church wrote her a letter and was like asking her that to amend the deed, because the deed in the 1 acre that she sold them only specified that it could be used for a church. And so they responded and they said, you know, for us to be able to build a community, make money, support ourselves, we need to be able to use this church in more than just a church. We need to, will you let us use it as a school? Can we rent it out? Renting out is how we can actually start to build wealth and then pay you off, and then eventually have our own land. And so this is the conversation that's still happening right now. And it just is crazy to sort of see that even under the throes of just past the abolition of slavery, that we're still kind of having that issue and still having to fight and say that our communities are everything. If you break up our communities, we don't have a community anymore that is as strong as if we are collectively together. And if we're not collectively together, how is it that we can change our future, build wealth autonomously, and then move forward to focus on more exciting and ambitious things? So I just wanted to point that out, because you're talking about this thing that I'm coming across from the 1800s that is just wild to me.
Yeah, you make me want to get a suit on and do some diving and see what I can find. That's cool.
That'll be season 4. Season 4, we're gonna do it. Let's get it. But something that you both share has me thinking that a lot of your work involves expanding or even like shifting these narratives of what we know about not just Black history, but also US history, right? And so do you find there to be generally support or resistance for what you're trying to accomplish? Like, you know, Tyrance, you mentioned, like, you know, reparations still hasn't hit Tulsa yet, right? The example that you just shared, Stephanie, like, you know, we're 2023, so having the same conversations. Are folks on the ground in your communities, folks you're engaging with, are they receptive and responsive, supportive to what you're trying to do? Are you encountering resistance from any pockets, and are you having, and what do those exchanges look like?
Yeah, so I mean, on a government level, our city is dead set against any sort of reparations. It's actually pretty ridiculous, and it makes you wonder. Wow. Yeah, it's like totally ridiculous coming from a city that really the only thing that makes it stands out is this incredible history that was there, and we're happy to pimp it when it comes to to getting money and attention to the city, but when it comes to actually doing right by it, everybody acts like they can't do it. So yeah, no, there are a lot of obstacles, specifically in direct reparations. But I'll say this, even when it comes to the quote unquote rebuilding work, you'll find this deal where there is a lot of efforts to throw money and create activity around the idea of rebirthing, you know, Black Wall Street, or doing justice to this community. But if you take a closer look, you will see that there is not really a concerted effort to measure what that actually looks like and be on the hook and be accountable for, is this truly bringing the community forward? Or essentially breeding these situations to where we get to have a lot of media attention and a whole lot of interest and a whole lot of business solely off the fact that there's activity in this area, but there's not really any metrics or anybody really looking to see like, you know, is this actually helping the community, or is this more so about getting attention for our city? So yeah, there's hard resistance in direct like reparations, but even in the efforts that are trying to help, I think there needs to be a more concerted effort to understand how we're actually going to do that and not just get a lot of attention for saying there's activity in this super unique and super important area where there previously wasn't any.
And this is hopefully where that those studies that you mentioned that you've been a part of, can really
Exactly.
lend to saying, okay, like we understand like the what the need is. Now let's put the pieces in place, the roadmap, and get like you know, the resources and people, programs in place, and upholding, putting money behind these things, putting people behind these things, sustainable programs behind these things to ensure that we can reach those salary needs and closing like the income and employment needs for that
Yeah,
2053.
yeah, and I know we gotta go on, but I just wanted to add this other thing. I mean, even with what you said, it's dawned on me recently that programs and systems aren't quite the same thing. You can have a lot of programs trying to address an issue, but 5 to 10 years from now, the real metrics that determine where we are on those issues haven't changed at all. So I think I agree with you, but I think it's really important that we really get ingrained and granular in what that means, because that was an epiphany and a hard conversation I had to have even with myself and my community in general when it comes to actually trying to do this work.
That's right. Stephanie?
So right now is sort of a unique time down here in North Carolina, and especially in the Lower Cape Fear, where there is a lot of discussion regarding the Gullah Geechee corridor, the Gullah Geechee Commission. There's now, they're in the planning stages, and I think they've got like solidified some funding to start extending the corridor up this way, because traditionally, the corridor extended from Jacksonville or St. Augustine, Florida, up just up until the border of South Carolina, which we all know about borders, like those are, I mean, they're imaginary lines, so you can't really like put a border to that. But we think that Navassa is actually the sort of northern terminus, so Navassa and Jacksonville, North Carolina, so Jacksonville to Jacksonville. And so as a part of that sort of understanding and finally acknowledging that, there are folks from the Park Service, from the city, from the Gullah Geechee Commission, who are trying to design a blue and greenway extension from the existing tract from South Carolina up into North Carolina. And so there's a lot of development that is underway right now. I think that from my perspective, having African-American history and Black history being on the forefront of people's brains and mouths and studies is good, but it hasn't always been this way from what I've heard from people who've lived in Wilmington and Brunswick County, like up until recently even. And there are still people, even with finally this amplitude of information finally being accepted into the historical narrative, people still don't understand that the lines you can see from Google Earth that are dug into the landscape, that those are rice canals that were hand dug by enslaved people. People don't know about Abraham Galloway, or they don't know about all of the Black pilots that worked the naval stores and worked the waterways and could usurp power on a huge ship coming into Wilmington Port because they knew where all the moving shoals were. So there's a lot of power in that history that has been either intentionally ignored and erased and left out of the discussion. But I think it is easier to talk about it now. I think people are more open to it. You still get a lot of hateful comments. Anything you post on the internet is sort of subject to that, unfortunately. But I think whenever I talk about my work to people in a diverse group, I usually get a lot of positive feedback, which is good to hear. But the the real test is actually going to come with the developers in Wilmington who are getting slammed, and Brunswick County. So Leland and Belleville are kind of the two main towns that border the Brunswick River. They're getting a lot of plans or proposals from developers who want to just come in and, you know, build apartments and commercial businesses, which, yes, there is good to that, to bring people, especially if you're starting to build a new Blue and Greenway trail and you want tourism. However, I think it'll be enlightening to see if they take into account the existing cultural resources that are there, and whether or not, and that, you know, the state has a lot to do with this as well, because they can kind of veto some things, but to really say, if this history matters so much, am I going to let this developer demolish across the top of this? Or are they going to try and let someone come in and interpret that history so that other people can learn about it and experience the landscape with that in mind? So I think that's going to be kind of the real test. And there's Cape Fear River Watch and a bunch of other local activists in Wilmington have been very vocal about trying to keep that in consideration with all the development.
And so you all are both very accomplished young professionals. Really excited to see where you all are 10, 15 years from now. Question that I have for you all is, what is one thing about your career that you wish you knew before you got into it? And y'all can keep it 100 too.
That sometimes to get things done, you got to be a bare knuckle cage fighting individual. It's just, you know, it's it's cold world. I mean, I can't say I didn't know that, but I can say I didn't understand to what extent it would be true. That's what I can say.
For me, and this is getting a little more personal, I think having Black mentors and advisors, I've realized I've always known that's important, but especially in this field, how having even one Black professor or mentor or community member who will validate what you're doing and say, and like offer support and say, I don't want to see you quit, because there were a couple times where I was this close to quitting this program. I was this close to just dropping everything. I was so stressed out and overworked and just like at my limit. And I had Dr. Hargrove on my committee. He was like, "You sound so different from when I talked to you last." He's like, "I was so scared you were going to quit, but what you're doing is important. I need you to stick with it. Anything I can do to help you." And like, that is everything. And that's not to say I don't have support in my department. It's not to say that I don't have white colleagues and professors who do offer support, because that is absolutely the case, but it is different from someone who has the lived experience of being a Black person and knowing what it's like to go through this field that historically, as archaeology, has been very white male dominated. And it's time to change. And so when you're trying to change by just being in this space, and then change the field by also what you're studying, it can feel rough, like sandpaper to some people. And so that's one thing that I sort of am grateful to have, and kind of realized how important that is in this field specifically.
No, like major respect to that. Like, you're on the front lines in more ways than one, and in that lion's den. So, you know, you all are both, I like that terminology, Tyrance, like bare knuckle fighters in a lot of ways. Like, you're fighting like systems and histories. So really appreciate all that you all are doing. Tyrance, as far as Black Tech Street, what would you like the legacy of this initiative to be in Tulsa, and perhaps even beyond Tulsa?
Yeah, so as it relates to Tulsa, I would like the legacy of this org to essentially be a platform that shows the descendants of Greenwood and future residents that tech is a pathway that we can use to not only reclaim what was lost, but scale beyond what our ancestors ever thought was possible. And so, I mean, intangibility, what does that look like? Again, I've said it before, Tulsa being a hub for cyber and eventually artificial intelligence, Black cyber and AI talent. You've got companies coming out of the city, but more specifically, when it comes to narrative, I want the legacy of BTS to be, it was a new story for what it means to be Black in America. You know, Black Wall Street redefined what it meant to be Black in America by redefining what was possible for people who are Black in America. So I would like Black Tech Street to do that once again, to show that through technology, Black people can fundamentally change our economic position in this country, but also fundamentally change our prospect for impacting this world in a positive manner.
And Stephanie, so you've traveled the globe, you've been all over the country in all types of terrains and environments. What have you discovered that has expanded or changed the narrative of our understanding of the lives of Black people in America? Is there a single artifact that you were like, this is the one, there's probably like a myriad different things you've come across. Is there one that kind of like stands out to you as one that's particularly endeared?
So I would say that for me, and so for that question, as far as archaeology goes, just a quick background is archaeology is the study of people through things, essentially. And for me, the artifacts, I try not to really focus so much on the objects themselves insofar as what they can tell us about the lives of the people who may have used it. But I will say, and I think I mentioned this in our first interview, that one of one of the most important artifacts that I have found is actually either like manos and metates. And I did a lot of work out in Southwest United States. And so there's a lot of indigenous prehistoric sites out there. And what we would find is there's different types where, so you have the mano, which is in your hand, and the metate is the surface by which you will grind. So they're also known as grinding stones, grinding slicks you can find on large permanent boulders. But those to me are really just, I don't know, powerful in that I'm touching something that someone utilized as well, like their hand touched it, my hand is touching it. You can see the wear in that metate and that it was used so much. And so that's kind of the type of artifact that I connect with really well. And as far as in like my study area, I haven't been able to do any digging, and we haven't really found hand tools, but you have the threshing baskets or the winnowing baskets. You've got hand shovels, wooden mortar and pestles for the rice holes, and those types of things would be the ones that I would just feel a really deep connection with and would hold a lot of that history and sort of make it sink in that this canal was dug with this shovel, and someone may have lived and died in this canal, quite literally lived an entire life digging this thing. And so so for me, yeah, the objects connect back, the ones that connect back the most to telling the story are the ones that stand out. But
I appreciate you both sharing that, like the tangible and intangibles of your work are very much felt today. And when there's times when you want to quit your program, or like if you're in like a community meeting or in a space where it's just so much tension that you're coming up against, just know that and the people on the call can probably attest to that as well, that you have a community behind this that's looking to you and sees what you're doing in your leadership, fully appreciates what you're trying to accomplish. And so I'm about to close out my questions, and I can go on for days, but I want to see if if anyone just want to hold space, if anyone had a question from the audience to pose to Tyrance as he's about to jump. If not, then I'll kick it over to Rihanna for a broader
Oh
Q&A.
yeah, why does Tyrance have to leave?
Oh yes, Tyrants. I mean, I can big you up, but you can big yourself up. I'm gonna let you. You got this. You got the shirt. You got the tie. Come on, bro.
Yeah, so I was invited to a cybersecurity Black cybersecurity roundtable at the White House. So I gotta jump. I do appreciate y'all. This has been really fun. Stephanie, you're inspiring. I might go back and change my major. You know, it's pretty cool. But Hassan, man, Doc, I really appreciate you, man. This is incredible what you put together.
Appreciate you, bro.
me.
And all the best. Got you.
Nice to meet you, Tyrance. Good luck today.
Thank you.
So Stephanie, I have a question for you. And if folks have any questions from the audience, you can feel free to drop. Like I said, I can ask questions for days, kind of what I do. What do you enjoy the most and maybe the least about your job? If anyone's thinking about, you know, going into archaeology, because I know like even like your passion was like, you know, art history, and you really were able to like merge that with, you know, your love for outdoors and all these different things, but you really found a way to like craft this awesome lane for yourself and this awesome career. So yeah.
I mean, it was definitely not a straight trajectory. And I would say to anyone it kind of harkens back to what did you want to be when you grow up? And how a straight arrow path is very rare to find for people. And I'm certainly not one of them. I'm an art school dropout. I have worked, bartended. I've been in the service industry since I was 15. So even when I'm in school or have a job as an archaeologist with the park or CRM, you know, I'm often also working in a restaurant or at a bar. Thankfully, the last couple of years I haven't had to. Well, last year I did, but now that I'm in grad school, it's kind of hard to find the time, which is tough. I still have bills to pay. I'm in my 30s. I finished my undergrad in my mid 20s, took another break before I got into grad school. So I have a lot of imposter syndrome. I've got, actual sort of like adult bills to consider, but I'm also told by my, department that you're not supposed to have a job, especially if you have one for financial aid, like you have a GA, but you're not encouraged to have another one, but that's just not possible. And then where do I find time to write my thesis and do any kind of other work or engage in these kind of events? I think the least important thing, or the least enjoyable thing about at least being in academia still is the grind. I've been grinding my whole life pretty much. And so it's exhausting. It pushes you kind of to your mental limits, to your, you do have to put yourself out there. You have to advocate for yourself, which took me a long time to kind of be able to, as a former people pleaser, like put my boundaries up, advocate for myself, tell someone when I'm not comfortable with that. I've had, a lot of those instances, but through that all, the benefit of this, and my favorite part is, so maritime archaeology isn't always diving, and that's my favorite part, honestly, is one of it as far as a method-based part of my job is diving. It is the closest thing you can ever feel like you're flying. It's quiet. You can really focus on what you're looking at. It's just a completely other world. It's incredible. And you really get to communicate with a good team sort of non-verbally. And it's a really successful feeling to come away from documenting a site or looking at a site with a good crew. It's really an unbelievable feeling. So even if you're not in maritime archaeology, if any of you are interested in getting scuba certified, I highly recommend it. But then aside to that, it's working with communities. So when I did undergrad archaeology, when I was in undergrad and was doing archaeology, my focus was on like Bronze Age Aegean and like really ancient Roman architecture and city planning and a very, very old sort of disconnected history. And after going through that and then working in the field for a bit, I realized that what I really missed was working with people. Like, I'm a people person, as exhausting as it can be working public facing jobs. It's really fulfilling. And if I can help people figure out a history or provide a service that will help them understand more about their past or their community, that's something, the piece that was missing. And so that for me is also one of my favorite parts of this job.
Awesome. Yeah, and kudos on the diving piece that you named as well. I recently started went into the water myself, put the wetsuit on, felt hella awkward because I was just like, yo, it feels like you're naked. It's just like, oh, like we out here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, but once you go under, once you submerge, it really feels like you're on a different planet. You know, it feels like the land has, like, you know, it's a whole other world. But like when you're underwater, we saw sharks and turtles and fish and all these kind of things. And so I'm just like, oh wow, Stephanie gets to do this like for a living. Like that's pretty dope. And the company that you work with, that you volunteer with, Diving with a Purpose, that's also like a really awesome org, and like that they're training young people to be divers, and so it's really, really powerful work that you're doing on this side as well. I don't know how when you sleep, but you're doing all the things.
Yeah, it's a rare thing.
Hats off to you for all of that. Just know that we at Career Catalyst, we salute you for the work that you've done and the work that Tyrance has done as well. And just want to thank you for taking time for hopping on this conversation. We definitely will be having more engagements with you and with Tyrance and the rest of our Career Catalyst guests that we've had over time. Season 3 of Career Catalyst is kicking off within the next month, so be sure to check that out. I'll kick it over to Brianna to share more about how folks might want to follow us or stay engaged and plugged in with us. But Stephanie, thank you so much for spending time with us, and keep me posted on when you're near the end of your graduate program so we could big you up and celebrate you on your major accomplishment, right? Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. Always a pleasure talking with you, and yeah, we'll definitely be in touch. And thank you guys for coming.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for handing it over, Dr. Hassan. That was incredible. I hope everyone enjoyed that just as much as I did. So quickly before we wrap up, I just wanted to take this time and space to invite anyone who enjoyed that. If you do work for a youth serving organization in a community or a school, we would love to have a conversation about partnership with you. So please head over to our website at careercatalyst.org. Look for the Contact Us form and just fill that out with your information. This is also how you can subscribe to our newsletter, so you'll always be kept abreast of exciting events just like this. And as you heard Dr. Hassan say, this is really only the beginning. We're looking forward to having more engagements like this in the future. Also, you see our Facebook page, our Instagram. You can find us at Career Catalyst Smash, on Twitter, as well as LinkedIn. Dr. Hassan, is there anything else you wanted to add while we have this space to thank our guests for their attendance?
Just a major thank you to both of them now. I know they are both are on their way to their next engagements. Huge thank you to all of our attendees as well. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter. You can do that through our Contact Us page. All the socials are there, as Brianna, as you shared. They're looking forward to more engagements like this, so keep an eye out for additional events. And if like Brianna shared, if you're an educator or know an educator, or you want to bring Career Catalyst to your school or youth program, your community, it's a free program, so hit us up and we'll take the conversation from there. Thanks again for coming out, everybody. See ya.